Welcome, Sandy Skeeter, to Home is Where the Dark Is. Thank you so much for being here. I mean, I've known you for 8 years now, and I've been able to share this time here at Sound City, and it's been so great. It's been a roller coaster ride for me, but like the memories have been amazing, and I'm looking forward to be here many more years. So first of all, I just want to thank you for for having me here and for being.
I'm honored.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I want to get right into it and just start with, there's so much I don't know about you, and I think that the world would love to know about you and how you came into, Sound City. Can you give us a little back history on how you ended up here and
Sure.
Your passions leading up to that?
Well, I grew up around the studio, and my claim to fame is, I have two claims to fame. When they recorded that Evel Knievel album, my fourth and fifth grade class came, and we were the kids in the audience who asked the questions. So that was hilarious. So that's like 73, I think. The Snake River jump was 74, but I could be mistaken. And then my second claim to fame is that during college at UCLA, in the summers, I worked in the office at Sound City for Paula Salvatore. And I made the coffee for Holy Diver.
Yeah.
But, you're the girl in the office. You answer the phones, you give the messages, go get the food, whatever, it's not a glamorous job or whatever. But my dad threw me a bone, and that's what I did in 2 summers, I think it was. And so, I think my dad, I got the bug of being in the music industry because we all love music. And, then I went to college, and my first job out of college, I worked at a shelter for battered women, which was, another passion, like helping people. And then after about a year, I'm like, do I really want to do this for my life? Because it's hard.
I bet.
I'd rather make money, be in business, and fundraise for charity. So then I set my sights on being back in the music business. And, it was slow going. It's hard to get the first job, but I made marketing calls for Hits Magazine, and they had a marketing company. So basically you're calling record stores and saying, how's the new Bangles doing or whatever, and then you send them a promo if you have one, or, it's like real ground level marketing. The labels or radio promoters would sometimes pay for it because they're trying to, if a single's popping on a radio station, you want to make sure it's in stock in the stores. And are they playing it? Do they know about it? Whatever. And that was a very low rent, minimum wage thing where they just gave me however many hours they had. Mm-hmm. But it allowed me to learn all the radio stations in all the markets and all the record stores in the markets. So I knew, Cleveland, that would be, National Record Mart and Katz and, whatever, all the stores that have gone away. So, and then shortly after doing that for about a year, I was looking for a real job. And my dad's like, oh, you ought to send your resume to Joe Mansfield. He's at Capitol. And he was a friendly face and a friendly guy in sales at RCA at the time when my dad had Rick Springfield on RCA. And they were just, industry acquaintances, not super. And I said, I'm doing this, and here's my resume, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, when he got the resume, which now I think about the letter, it was way too long. He handed it to the gal who was doing that at Capitol and said, oh, this is for you, Sue. You're looking for somebody, And it was just perfect timing. And I went and interviewed for the job at Capitol EMI, which is the distribution company for Capitol, EMI, SBK, Blue Note. And had a great interview. I'm like, I got that job. But then they had to open it up to the company, and she had to interview 40 or 50 other people. Uh-huh. But then I still got it.
Good.
So there I was, a young lady, getting on the Hollywood freeway, driving to Hollywood. There's the Capitol Records building. I'm going to work there. It was like a dream come true. So I still had to make the stupid marketing calls to record stores all over the country.
Yeah.
And back in those days, you also were trying to work the Billboard charts. because some stores were reporting to Billboard. It was before SoundScan. So they could lie and say, we sold 3 when they didn't sell any or whatever, So you had to make friends with, and believe it or not, you make friends with people on the phone and all over the country, and they're like still friends, or they're Facebook friends. So it's like, industry acquaintances or whatever. And maybe the guy becomes a buyer later, and then you go to Amarillo and call on there's the guy who you used to talk to in the record store or whatever. So, I mean, it was a great first job. So.
How long were you at Capitol?
87 to 91.
Okay.
And we, back then, Capitol EMI didn't have a whole lot of hits. We first the doors stayed open on catalog sales. So that's like re-releasing the Beatles, re-releasing Duran Duran, re-releasing the whole Iron Maiden catalog, Heart. Just like these were the stable, that kept the doors open. But then we started to have a few hits, the big Bonnie Raitt record, the big Poison record, with the rock ballad Every Rose Has Its Thorn was like #1 at Christmas time, and that means that the charts freeze for like 2 weeks and you're going to have the #1 record at Christmas. It was like, yes, and of course, when you work in sales, you like the hits. You're not like A&Ring anything. And so then we had Hammer. And so we started to have some hits. And then EMI made some moves and they bought Chrysalis. So then we had their whole catalog to sell. And then we had that beautiful Sinead O'Connor Nothing Compares to You record, which is a huge hit. And like Wilson Phillips and, anyway, we started to have some hits. So we were in business.
So when you were there, I mean, I'm sure you're doing a lot of, you're in the offices and stuff, but did you develop relationships with like, the people passing through, like the engineers, like the house engineers, or like, were you able to like kind of like become friends, or were you more just kind of in the office?
And it's funny because then Paula went over there. No, because, the studio was on the first floor and way below, and you're up at the 11th floor or 12th floor or whatever. So not too much association with the studio. And the hilarious part was when Dave Grohl made the Sound City movie, all these people who were, my Facebook friends, the VP of marketing at Capitol, Ron McCarroll, Sandy, I had no idea your family was Sound City, because he knows me from Sandy from SEMA, Capitol EMI. So people didn't know. I guess it's sort of on the down low.
Okay.
And I definitely did not. I mean, yes, I sent my resume to a guy that my dad knew, but I definitely wasn't acting like I'm Sandy from Sound City or whatever.
Gotcha. So
then I decided to go to business school.
Okay.
So I had a job I loved, surrounded by very dedicated branch, coworkers and branch managers, and it was really fun. But I thought, I could just be doing this forever. Here comes my next MC Hammer record. Here comes my next Bonnie Raitt record. Here comes, and obviously you try to keep it fresh. And you try to do new things for marketing and sales, but it's just forever. And I thought, there's so much. There's got to be more out there. And so one of my friends who was a Harvard Business School guy said, Sandy, you should go to this particular school, Northwestern. It's like more for like marketing people. And at the time it was the #1 business school. So I applied to a couple, I don't think I got into Harvard, but I got into Kellogg, which is the Graduate School of Management at Northwestern.
Okay. And
all my friends thought I was nuts because you don't leave a job in the music industry, especially when you like. And because it's hard to get back in.
Yeah.
So, I did it. And I'm so glad I did because there's so many things and so many tools that the record industry wasn't using. And
well, I think like if you're looking for something a little deeper, and like you said, it would be forever. So, and like everyone knows when it's the right time to move on, regardless of when your friends are going, why would you leave a stable job like that in the music industry that everyone wants?
That's right.
So I think that it's really important to listen to your gut and your intuition on things like that, which you did. So
yeah. So, and here's the hilarious part of my journey too. I had taught a class at UCLA Extension. It was called sales and distribution from the record label to the consumer. And I met them because one of my friends was like on the committee to help the recording industry, classes that, be relevant. And he worked in music publishing. He's like, Sandy, you should join. And so I just, went to career day and gave him posters. I was just very tangentially associated. And then they liked me and they said, you should teach a class. And I'm like, so here I am in this great job and everything, but none of my coworkers are doing anything like this. So I did it just to stretch myself to see if I could do it. I am not a public speaker, although I'm better than I used to be, right? And I'm like, could I teach a class for like 9 weeks for 3 hours at UCLA and give these people some value? And there's so much information. So I did it. And then I got guest speakers like, okay, this is indie night. So indie distribution and indie labels, and then major label people, or, whatever, manufacturing, marketing. And then some of my students got internships from my associates and stuff. Okay. And then this one kid, he was a kid because he was 21 at the time, who sat in the front. Sandy, what do you do about this? Sandy, I'm trying to get a #1 record, and how many cleans do I give them? Which cleans is, sellable goods. You're giving money to the person, to their store to get a reporting. And I was just like, who is this kid? And he took me to lunch, and he worked it. And he was from Spain, right? And so we kept in touch. He got an internship with a friend who was a product manager at Capital. And then because he was around Capital and he was from Spain, he got to know the head of the EMI Latin at the time. And then he became his assistant.
Okay.
And he was doing all these things. And Sandy, what do I do? And I said, I'm totally taking credit for this. It was my idea. I said, why is the Latin product going through this independent system that's like how it was in the 50s and 60s for our records? We have a huge distribution. The records are at our DCs, distribution centers. It should go through SEMA, which is where I worked. And it's the same buyers. Like if you go to Warehouse Corporate, there's a Latin buyer and he's right next to the rock buyer or whatever. Use the same sales rep. He doesn't have to speak Spanish.
Yeah.
And you don't know all the classical stuff. You don't know all the jazz stuff. You don't know all the industrial stuff. You don't know, obviously when you're a sales rep, you're getting a presentation. If there's a book that you're selling and they say, this is an A release, everybody needs to have it. Or maybe there's something you personally like folk or something. So, not everyone knows everything, but you don't care what it is. You're just trying to sell it.
Yeah.
So, and do you know that I planted the idea and Ricardo planted the idea, and then soon after when you have a distribution system, you need more product.
Yeah.
And in the old days, it used to be guys driving up to the wholesaler and say, how many do you want of the new Beatles or Elvis or whatever it was? And then there was all this free goods. It was like, the old record business was like wackadoodle, and that's what Latin was still like that. It wasn't systemized or as professional and so it was my idea.
Wow.
And we were the first major to put the Latin product through their own distribution.
Wow. That's major. That's huge. So you did the class at UCLA Extension. There's something I want to say about it too, because I think it's great for people to hear about, you choose your career path and you kind of maybe you pivot a little bit, but I think it's important to push yourself outside your comfort zone here and there. And like you said, you weren't experienced as a public speaker, but you said you had value to offer. So maybe doing something like me, the idea of teaching a class is scary because I don't feel like I'm not a teacher. I have a lot to offer, but just
right.
That is completely not what I'm used to. So I think the fact that you pushed yourself to do something a little bit uncomfortable, but it, obviously you got a lot from it yourself and you provide a lot of value to others, and you met that guy that you created that connection. So yeah, I think that's a very a great thing to try and try and do over your career is like maybe even though you're really comfortable with certain parts of your career, you got to like branch out and try something. Yeah, try something a little different.
It's boring if you don't.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's not even the punchline of the story.
Okay.
So the guy who took my class was 21, did all these things, got the job. He said, so I go to business school. I said, well, I'm out of here. He said, I'm going to start a record label. I said, well, I'm going to business school. Business school is only 2 years. It's pretty quick. And I said, well, yeah, I'll help you, whatever. And so I go to school and fall to, May or June. And then I came back from the summer and he's like, Sandy, I need your help. Blah, blah, blah. So he and his partner, British guy, were starting a techno label. They call it techno, but it's like EDM now. Mm-hmm. And they were working on licensing the tracks and getting stuff directly from the England or where it was being produced in Europe, because the only compilations that you could buy here in the States were through the majors, through these, and the music was already 2 or 3 years old.
Okay.
So they had identified a niche. So I take the guy, we go to Tower Sunset and I talk to like the head buyer. I'm like, hey, what about, and they're like, yeah, we have this, but this one sells really well. And it was all major label stuff, but it was just, it wasn't for the U.S. market. So these guys had a good idea. And so they spent all this time licensing the first one, right? And I'm like, okay, this is what you do. You need a sales sheet. You got to get a barcode. They wrote it up and everything. And then I made a few calls, and I helped them get distribution with California Record Distributors, which was a local thing. And luckily for them, at the time, and then they had it manufactured at Rainbow here in the Valley. And at the time, and it was all credit card. They had no money at all or anything. And they had a partner in England who could get the tracks, or find the tracks, Stefan. And it sold, right? So then they, CRD was part of a company where they got 3 different independent distributors to kind of make the first national distributor. So CRD on the West Coast. What was the one in Texas? Gosh, I can't remember. Big something or whatever. And then there was Malvern on the East Coast. So all of a sudden they had a record that was selling. And the packaging was awesome. And in the independent distribution game, you have to give more product or you're not going to get paid, because what they're afraid of is they sell a bunch of it and then a couple months later they might get the returns. And so any money that you made, they want to hold on to your money even though it's sold or it's selling, but the reorders might dry up or whatever. So It's important to get another one in the pipeline. Anyway, and meanwhile, I'm at business school. These guys are doing this. And these calls me up, Sandy, we sold 200,000. I'm like, oh my God. We need you. I go, well, I get out in May. So I went to business school and then I came back and I worked for the guy who took my class.
Wow.
Moonshine music. Yeah.
That's
hilarious.
Crazy. That's awesome.
And they, I called up the distributors and they didn't know me or anything. They're like, who is this? They're all these salty old sales guys. So they didn't think I knew anything. I'm like, no, I worked for SEMA. I know how it works. And I started going to the branches and they're like, oh, like it's a real label. And they started taking us much more seriously. We started selling a ton of techno because we were the first ones to give people the new stuff. And these guys were, the art was very rave, like, the people who do the rave flyers, looks like the Tide logo, but not quite. They were doing all that stuff. And so it totally sold.
Wow.
So, so we made something together. Yeah.
So around what time, around what year was that when you went back to work for them?
So
after business school?
I went to school 91 and I graduated in 93. So it was summer of 93. So,
Okay.
and then like, one of my girlfriends was the head of sales for Warner Brothers. And she's like, "Oh, I have this Paul Oakenfold." And I'm like, "I had that in 92." It was 10 years later or whatever. I'm like, they didn't know. The majors don't know sometimes. They really do not know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So when did you decide to come in and start working with your dad here at Sound City? Like when did that transition happen? And like what was your decision to, like, what was your mindset like coming into Sound City?
Well, this ties in with the dark days.
Okay.
Should I say it?
It's up to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in 2001, my, the company I was working for, Moonshine, the head CEO or whatever, gave me my walking papers. And the hilarious part is they never knew anything about the music industry. And here we were at these meetings, early on, all these people saying what we thought they should do with the record, da da da. Well, what does Sandy think? Like, it was so embarrassing. Like, because all these kids, club kids, who were in the rave scene, didn't know anything about. I mean, they knew the customer more than I did, but and so anyway, so I worked there for 10 years, and then I got fired because I think they saw the writing on the wall. Because, at the time there was what was the first guy doing the downloads?
Downloads, Napster?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were fully on board. Like, this is where it's going. We're not manufacturing, except for maybe vinyl. They saw the writing on the wall, and that I was the VP of sales.
Yeah.
And so, you still need a VP of sales to set things up with Apple Music and Spotify and do promotions. But, I guess they didn't want to pay the money or didn't want me anymore. And so I lost my job. And so it was a bad time. My boyfriend's dad had passed, and it was just a rough time. And they're like, you can't get rid of Sandy. Sandy is Moonshine. I was Moonshine to the industry because all these other guys were just club. I mean, obviously we had press and publicity. We had someone working college radio. We had people manufacturing. We had a licensing lady and stuff. But to the record industry, I was Moonshine.
Yeah.
So whatever. I lost that identity or whatever. But
that was, you said 10 years?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good run. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to hear that. I mean, are they still around now or no?
No.
That's what I thought. Okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So they didn't see the old value in the old Sandy Skeeter anymore. Oh. Actually, so I'm talking out of turn now, but the guy said to me, "I can't have you disagreeing with me in the staff meetings anymore." I said, "Come on, you've known me for 10 years. This is how I am."
Yeah.
I'm just like, I say what it is. And that was the reason. I go, "What about the video releases I have set up?" It's like, he didn't care. I was in the middle of all these projects and stuff. I'm like, whatever. So it was acrimonious.
Okay.
But they're just dead to me. So I have no idea what they do. And so, and this is another of my favorite stories to tell. So I came to do projects because we have a lot of recorded content in the archives. Sound City, very early on, my dad realized you don't make any money in the studio business because it's like a hotel where you only have so many hours in the day and so many days in the year. And if you're max booked, you're maxed staffed. And especially if you're going to tape, you have a tech maintenance engineer sleeping on the couch at all hours because, those tape machines go down and there's, REO Speedwagon or whoever, you're ruining their vibe if something breaks or whatever.
Yeah.
So they realized pretty quickly that you don't make money in that. But it's sort of like the honey that draws the flies or draws the bees, my dad would say. And so they started using downtime to speculate on artists. And they started that early because my dad's partner, Joe Gottfried, was very artist driven, and he was sort of like a manager of artists, late 50s and stuff. And When my dad bought the studio, he invested in 1970. It was because the government had closed them down because they hadn't paid their taxes, payroll taxes. And so he kind of bought it at an auction. But then he gave 49% to Joe Gottfried because he didn't know anything about the recording business. So my dad was like the guy who kept the doors open.
Okay.
And but pretty quickly they realized that you don't make any money. So they would let artists use, and also their staff. So if you were on staff at Sound City, you got free time. You maybe had to pay for the tape, maybe not, and, early on they, Buckingham Nicks did their solo album with Keith Olsen at Sound City. And it came out on a label that was called Anthem, that was through Polydor, and the label went under. So they always say, it was very hurtful for them. They were like dropped, it sold like 10 copies or whatever, but really the label went under. And because it was just a distributed label, the other, entity that was distributing it, Polydor, didn't have any responsibility to do anything with the record or anything. So it never had a chance. And they were heartbroken because they made a beautiful, incredible album. And 50 years later, people are still like, making copies of their vinyl. It's still not out on CD or anything. So they were heartbroken, and they came back to the studio, and Keith says, let me work some more on them. And my dad and his partner would say, let's get them another record deal. So let's work on new material. And, all at our cost. And my dad said, you just knew that they were brilliant. They were, as I said before, record labels really don't know. They like get a record and they go, oh, okay, whatever. But these guys in the studio were like, yeah, those guys are the shit. They're really talented. So, and then the famous Sound City story is that somebody brought Mick Fleetwood to the studio because I think they were all living in Laurel Canyon, and because this guy said, look, if I bring you customers, can I get a cut? And my dad and Joe were like, all day long, bring us business. And so he brought nobody even remembers the guy's name or anything, brought Mick Fleetwood. And when they booked the studio, they played Buckingham Nicks to show the capabilities of the monitors, the room, the recordist, the guy who recorded it, Keith Olsen, the board. And so right before they were scheduled to come in, the guitarist quit. So I think it was Bob Welch. I'm not sure. And in order to save the booking, my dad's partner Joe's like, well, what about Lindsay? We suggested, hey, what about that guitarist we played for you to join your band? And they're like, and they set up a band meeting, and then Fleetwood Mac invited Lindsay to be in the band, and he said, yeah, but you got to take my girlfriend. And so that's how Fleetwood Mac was born.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Damn. So yeah, I think what you said about your dad, that's a really, really like very smart business decision, because like, it's true. I mean, when you have a studio or a hotel, it's like you can only, even when you're max booked, you can only make so much, and then your expenses go up, so your margins are really thin. Right. So having, developing an artist and having the back end, and that is just extremely smart decision.
So nowadays we say content is king, but I mean, but it was more like publishing, and we're like, you don't make any money. You make money in publishing and being this band's manager or whatever. So they did it many times. I would say 100 times.
Wow.
And they, obviously the big hit was Rick Springfield. And he was a 8 or 9 year overnight sensation. They recorded, developed acting lessons, paid his rent.
Wow.
Paid his therapy, kept him alive, because it's demoralizing.
Yeah.
And so he was but when it hit, and they convinced Keith to do two songs for them, which was the 2 singles on the first album, and then the house guy, Bill Drescher, did the rest of the album. And and his first royalty check was $1 million. 1981 money.
Nice.
My dad told me, the only reason I know that is because my dad said that, my dad would schmooze with these bankers, investors. People are always like, "Is the studio for sale?" So it's for sale. Anything's for sale at the right price. So he was always schmoozing with people. And this one banker they had a relationship with, they called him up and said, "Hey, are you still at whatever the name is?" It's a defunct bank now, but yeah, I'm over here. And they go, "We want to come over and open up an account," right? And they take the check, and he's like, "Oh, $1 million check."
Wow.
Really funny. So, but the other thing is it came up in conversation before my dad died that he goes, "Oh, I can tell you exactly how much money we had into Rick Springfield. It was like $271,000.88 or whatever." He had some number records.
Yeah.
So that's 1979, 1980 money. That's a lot of money. They kept him going. And, at studios, familiarity breeds contempt. So the studio was like too hip. The studio staff, like, "Oh God, Rick's in again." And how to, because it was their artist. They kept, "Rick's in again," and it was kind of poppy. He's a good song, good, beautiful man, star quality, hard worker, good live act. It's a good songwriter, but it was poppy. And so the studio turned their nose up, Rick. And the first album, when his dog, who's on the cover, would have a poop in the hallway.
Oh God.
They're like, "Rick, your dog's, pooped in here again." Rick would have to come out and clean it up. Well, by the second album, that wasn't the case because he sold so many records. And they were recording the second album. The runners had to clean up the dog poop.
There you go.
So it's funny being in the studio because, if you have some artists that I remember in the early 2000s, Tears for Fears were in, and they weren't on a major label anymore. And the studio manager was like, "Oh yeah, it's Tears for Fears." I'm like, "Tears for Fears are awesome.
Hell yeah.
Don't be... Like, you can't judge the artist on, like, their circumstances at the moment." Like, she was kind of, embarrassed or whatever. Like, it wasn't a big name or whatever.
Because they weren't as relevant.
Right. Who cares?
Yeah.
You might be doing the next... I mean, look, Rick Rubin did the Johnny Cash comeback. He was doing dinner theater. He was... If you see the Rick Rubin interviews, it's so interesting. Like, who can I work with who's maybe not doing their best work anymore? Who's like fantastic, and he chose Johnny Cash, and it was brilliant. And we're all so glad that he brought him back or whatever. So you can't listen to any. There's the punchline of the whole thing. Don't listen to other people. Well, you have to follow your instincts and your.
Well, like what you said about the labels don't know what's gonna be great. Because they're not, most of them, they're not musicians. They're not artists. And when you said like the engineers that heard, Buckingham Nicks at the time, they're like, "These guys are fantastic. It's going to be huge." And like they knew. And like you said about Rick Rubin, it's like, even farther into his career, like he doesn't have to work. He can work with anybody. Like he's still choosing to like resurrect an artist because he cares about the music. That's what it should.
Or like Neil Diamond, late in his career, or Donovan or whatever.
Yeah, it's because that's what it should all be about. That is the music, and regardless if Tears for Fears they weren't as popular as they were during their hits, it shouldn't matter. But I see what you're saying. Like so
you can't. Who knows? Somebody can have a hit 20 years later.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. So okay, so you're.
So the reason I came to work with my dad is because I lost my job, and I knew we had all these recordings, and so I tried, and we had a Rick Springfield TV special, so I put that on video, and I knew the guys in all the independent distributors, so I could get a deal. But it's hard to make any money if you have to manufacture physical goods. And so I did that for a while. And then there's my dad sitting behind the desk, and there's this spreadsheet of the rent roll. And I said, "Holy crap, that's what this place does?" And he said, "Well, that's what it does if people paid their rent." And I said, "I'm in the real estate business." And so I just started upgrading the tenants. and Goodnight LA wasn't paying its bills. Goodnight LA was Keith Olsen's studio next to Sound City, and we got somebody to lease that out, and then we built a green screen, and we started building in small rooms because it turns out that other studios, Henson and most of them, the Village, that they have these small rooms, and then people rent them and put their gear in there.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps the studio open. So that's what I started doing. And it worked.
Around what year was that?
2001.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So,
and my dad's like, I'm going to start paying you this much because you're doing this so well. I'm like, yay, I have a new job. Property manager, Sound City Center.
yeah.
So for quite a while, though, I haven't really been in the music business. It's more of the real estate business. But I like to support my guys. And obviously, you're a tenant, helping in any way that I can.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, it's so interesting, like how, the different directions, our paths will go, like, just sometimes unexpectedly. And like you said, you started at Capital, you wanted to do business, you went to business school, and now you're at Sound City, like as a property manager. So, when you say like, you don't feel like you're really in the music industry, like I hear you there, but at the same time, it's like, to me, you've had so much experience in the music industry, like, working with some of the most amazing musicians of all time, like coming through Sound City. So I'm curious, like, what is your, for someone, maybe music business major or someone who wants to break into the industry, like what kind of advice would you give someone who's interested in kind of pursuing, the path that you did?
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, anymore there's different programs at like, Belmont University in Nashville, and there's a lot of classes you can take, and from UCL Extension or all across the country, so you can learn a little bit about how it works. So I would do that, or you just need to indenture yourself and identify a company that you admire and ask them for a summer internship, and just you have to persevere. But that might mean living at home or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I did during the different times where I wasn't really employed, full time or whatever. And the other thing is you can bloom where you're planted. Like, say you're in Portland or Oklahoma City or whatever, there's a music scene. So if you're in college, work at the college radio station, see how that works. Go to the convention if you get invited to the radio convention, see how that works. Be the concert promoter on campus. I mean, you can just start in a really small market. And I would say the same thing for bands. You have to just grow, become relevant in your town.
Yeah.
And then you go to the next town. And then you go to the next town. And next thing you know, somebody will ask you to open up for them or whatever. And you might play to 15 people, but it's 15 new people or whatever. So I've seen lots of articles about artists that make a good living. And they just do everything themselves, and they just grew it from a cottage industry. And they, obviously you're getting micro cents on the dollar at Spotify, but
yeah.
If you do all the things and you get a little lucky and you play, you can make a living.
Yeah, totally. Like I know a lot of musicians that tour a lot, and I've had a few of them on the podcast as well, but it's unless you're like in the really, upper level top tier, like a Metallica or whatever, like you're multiple different sources of income. Like it's not just from one thing. Like you have to optimize everything. You might have like 10 different sources, like from your streaming, from your shows, from your merch, from your publishing, from your song, whatever.
Right.
But that's just the reality. Like until you get to that super top level where you can just tour and everything is taken care of, and you have a financial manager that
Right.
budgets everything out for you and collects your royalties and collects your blah blah blah, and then you just go and do your thing and it's all taken care of. So until you get to that point, you have to be your own financial, manager, and
Right.
keep track of all the different sources of income and have it all, on the record. Yeah, it's really hard, but really you don't have to be in LA, you don't have to be in Nashville, you don't have to be in New York. You
No.
should. I think it's easier to start wherever you are, like you said, and make an impact there. And then if it gets to the point where, okay, now I'm going to go to LA because of this opportunity or this opportunity, but it's so hard to break through here.
Right.
It's incredibly hard. And I've lived here my whole life, and that's why it's been a wild up and down roller coaster for me, but it's incredibly difficult. But yeah, like you said, you can do great wherever you are. You just have to,
Right.
put in the work.
That's
So,
right.
just curious a little bit more about, when you were growing up, like what kind of music inspired you, as, when you're growing up, and like what kind of music did your dad play for you and stuff like that
Right.
really,
Yeah.
got you, into the music world.
My dad graduated high school in 1950, and then he went to college, and then he served in the Korean War briefly, but got injured, and then he came back to college. So he graduated a couple years off schedule in 56. So he was like, he would play on the hi-fi things that were like, it was the transition pop music, like, we would say it's kind of big band or whatever, like the Days of Wine and Roses, and he liked the borderline country western stuff. And but as my sister said, when we had a celebration of life for him, that he was the kind of dad where you're like, Dad, that's a good song, turn it up. And he would.
Nice.
So he always loved music, even though, he was more into, like, one time Tom Petty, this is when he's in his 80s or whatever, I'm like, and Tom Petty was on, he goes, oh, Tom Petty's really good. Like, he didn't know. All these, Tom Petty had been a customer since 1973 with Mudcrutch, and my dad didn't know all of his stuff, but it was like Wildflowers, it was like the more jangly guitar kind of like, later stuff or whatever. It's like, oh, Tom Petty's really good. I'm like, yes, Dad, he's really good. He's your bud. Yeah, so my dad would turn it up. And then I liked, we would use a transistor radio and go to the beach or whatever. It was like super hits of the 70s, and a lot of them were R&B, like OJ's and Gladys Knight and the Pips, whatever KHJ was playing or whatever. So I liked the pop hits. I still like a good hit. In the late 70s, then I liked the punk rock. So I went to, I would see X all the time, and the Blasters and the Stray Cats, and, kind of before they were big. So, so I considered myself a little bit of a punk rocker, even though.
Nice.
I saw the Police play at the Santa Monica Civic in, I guess it was 79.
Wow.
It's still one of the loudest shows I've ever been to, because somebody's dad got us the seats, and they were only a 3-piece. So they had it really loud to like fill it up, and they only had one album, and so they ended up playing Roxanne twice.
Nice.
So it was early days. So, so Joe Jackson at the Whiskey. I mean, I saw the Clash at the Palladium, but I wasn't into the hardcore punk, but yeah, I like the new wave kind of stuff.
Right on.
Talking Heads. I was very excited when I worked here in the summer, and Devo was in the rehearsal hall, people like that. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So we had a pretty big production. What was it? When did it start shooting? Like a year or two, like 2 years ago is when it started shooting, like for Daisy Jones and the Six. Like how did that come to be? And like, what was your experience like, being around during the production, like, and everything they did inside, like on set, like.
The guys who are leasing Sound City right now, and Sound City's not closed, it's just leased, are Blake Mills, producer Blake Mills, and guitar guy, and his business partner Tony Berg, who's a longtime industry A&R and producer. And they got the gig to be the musical consultants on it. And I don't know if it was because they're at Sound City or not, because Sound City is actually in the book. But maybe that flipped a idea for somebody or whatever. So so they had been working with, they came to me and said, look, we're going to teach the actors how to play. I said, oh, good. And so they rented a bunch of rehearsal space from me and, hangout room in the kitchen and stuff over down at the stage. And they had band camp for months and months. And then COVID hit. And then they said, well, we got to table this. We'll be back. And so then the next year they came back and rented again for band camp. But I was so proud of them because these are guys, in like the little breakout rooms, learning bass, learning guitar, learning drums. And, and, I met Sam Claflin, who is a singer in the parking lot. I'm like, oh, what do you play? And he goes, oh, I'm the lead singer. I said, oh, no pressure. Like, I'm like, can you sing? He goes, well, yeah. I mean, apparently he'd only done sort of musical theater. He hadn't been a lead singer. And then we all knew Riley had the genes, but could she be a Riley Keough? I don't know if she wasn't a lead singer. In fact, I read an interview where, she was like, she did her first audition. It was tapes. It was like Joni Mitchell kind of stuff. And they're like, well, could you go a little bit more Janis Joplin? So then she reinvented it and went for it, and they were all really proud of her. So they were around off and on for 2 years, and then they recorded all the and Blake and his team, bringing in people like Marcus Mumford and Brandi Carlile and all these people, collaborated, and they wrote the music because the lady who wrote the book wrote the lyrics.
Oh, okay.
And they apparently they took some poetic license. They didn't make it literal. Which, of course, book purists weren't into, but, they had to. So it was a collaboration of a lot of people. And then they wanted to film here too. And once a big production like that comes, especially a period piece, it's a big pain.
Yeah.
So you were a tenant, so they had to warn us, and I mean, and I, you don't make that much money on it, but for the pain, the money did not actually pay for all the pain. But anyway, we're just glad, the big Sound City signs there, and people can like, oh my gosh, they're at Sound City, even though they dressed it and it looks completely different, but still, just to pay more homage to the studio in the past. And
yeah, I thought it came out so good, honestly, and the music was so good as well. I had no idea that it was the actors like singing and performing until like I learned that later. But it just came. I thought it was so good. Like the songs are great. I thought the acting was great. Like the story, like everything came out so awesome. And
yeah, I mean, obviously they probably didn't play on the recording, the players, but when they did the live thing, they were playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wasn't privy to being at those days of shooting or whatever, but I was told, wow, we're so proud of them. They did great. And I think it's the blessing of COVID because they had more time to learn their instruments. They didn't have like just, 5 weeks, you're the drummer.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? The guy could like relax into it a little bit and actually play some songs. And now I follow some of them on Instagram and they're still playing and stuff. They're actors, but, and then I think Suki Waterhouse is she's the keyboardist. She's going full forward with like her music and stuff. So she may have been before.
Yeah.
So.
What did you think of how they like set dressed the live room and like the throwback vibe? Like, what did you think of that? I thought it looked awesome.
Yeah.
Like what they did to it. Yeah.
I thought to myself, I wish it was more like this now instead of the sterile.
I haven't been in there and since actually it was, what was that? You threw that little party, like, I don't know, it's been probably like 4 or 5 years ago now, but I don't think they were in your current tenant was in there then.
Right.
It was
No, it was just
Kevin.
yeah.
But I have no idea what it looks like now. But
Well, it looks pretty same. You
Okay.
know, obviously it's very white and bright and like, but the current tenants have so much gear. There's just walls of guitars and walls of this and walls of that, and we have all these keyboards. And I mean, I don't even know how Tony records in B because there's like no place for the person to stand.
is it crammed?
Yeah. So, it's just a different vibe. I mean, maybe we'll get back to vibe in the near future.
I'd love that.
Yeah. So going forward, I haven't been in the music business, but I'm more in the music business now in the last year. So we have really big plans and really big projects that I can't tell you about, but I am digitizing a lot of the archives and looking for a place to put out the music that we produced back in the day. Plus, there's odds and ends things that are like the world's most famous session recording bassist. Like, what is this one tape doing of this guy? And it's a groove that doesn't really go anywhere with this huge session for like 10 minutes. I'm like, I'm going to slice and dice that.
Yeah.
So I'm more in the music business now than I have been for 20 years.
That's great. It's great to hear that.
There's going to be a lot of good things coming from Sound City.
So happy to hear that. It needs to stay alive. It needs to continue to thrive. And is there,
it's going to thrive even more.
For anyone,
it's a future.
Yeah. For anyone interested in checking out, possibly contacting for booking in the future, like what would you like to plug before I wrap it up? People can visit soundcity.com.
Yeah, I actually have a meeting today. I have to completely redo the website. So it'll be soundcitystudios.com. And we're still selling the merch and everything. And I'm hoping to have a place where, because people are always asking what gear we have, and all this, and like I can't even book it really. There's tenants in there, so I hate to be rude, but I can't take all those calls, and so have a lot of the questions answered on the website. And then also, we get a lot of requests from young people who are at school, like recording school, and they want to know, and they're they have to pick an album and figure out how it was recorded, and I just don't have time. Besides, I don't know because I'm not a recording engineer, and there's so much information now on podcasts and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, they talk all day about that Tool album on this, or would it have some resources for people who are trying to do research and everything, and then also pay homage to all the things we did, because there's so many albums that were lost in time, and I still have the tapes on some of them. So really dig deep, and then also pay homage to some of the studios that are not here any longer. So we're doing a lot of history stuff. So maybe we're writing a book. There'll be a lot. Sound City's having a renaissance.
Yes. So glad to hear that.
It's not going anywhere.
Love that. Well, Sandy, thank you so much for coming by and having a chat. And I know there's going to be so many people happy to hear everything you shared. And yeah, thank you so much for...
Well, I hope you'll be a big part of it. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing to be here for the 8 years I have been here. And yeah, it's a major part of my career. So I appreciate you and, everything you've done. So yeah, I guess everyone go check out soundcitystudios.com. And thank you so much.
See you on the flip side.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you very much.